We received a lot of questions on Trump's new executive order. Today, I sat down with Andrew Beardall, General Counsel of the Capital Group, to go through each component of the executive order and how it impacts our employers. We are here today for an informative presentation on the executive order to break it down for you so that you can answer those questions that your employees may have of you. Remember that the new guidance is coming out all the time, and future actions by Congress or the president may have an impact on what we tell you today. Along with the guidance from federal agencies such as HUD, Education, and Treasury, Andrew, can you tell us how this came to be?
As the pandemic has gone on, there have been numerous efforts by the government to try and help out the American people. Some of those have come in the form of executive actions by governors or by the president. Some of them have happened on the level of state legislatures or up to the level of Congress. Some of the biggest were done by Congress, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, the CARES Act, and they provided all sorts of relief and benefits to Americans. However, nobody thought that this virus and these quarantines would last this long. So what happened is a lot of these provisions had sundown clauses in them. These benefits ended on a specific date. And what the president has done, or what he did on the 8th of August, was he took several of those that either have ended or were going to end shortly, and he's taken executive action in order to extend those benefits to the American people.
That's great, Andrew. Thank you for the overview. A lot of employers are asking about student loan programs, and they have employees that have to pay back student loans. How does the new executive order address that?
Well, it impacts things on a couple of different levels. On the employee level, way back in March, the president signed an order to defer those student loans. And the CARES Act codified that and said through the 30th of September, 2020, that no payments needed to be made and no interest would accrue on federally backed student loans. What the president did is he took that and he extended it by another 90 days through the end of the year. So now there is no payment due. This is something that can help out your employees by putting extra money in their pockets that would otherwise be due as student loan payments. Or on the flip side, if they want to pay their student loans right now, it's a terrific time because every dollar that they put in goes towards principal rather than towards any interest.
That's great advice. If I'm an HR person and an employee comes to me asking the new executive order, I heard that I don't have to make student loan payments. What would you recommend? How would they find out if it impacts the employee?
Well, again, on the employee level, what they should do is reach out to their servicer, whether it's Navy, Intermobile, or any of a dozen others, and ask them or log onto your account and you'll see when the next payment is due. What's more interesting, though, is how this affects employers. Employers who may provide a student loan employee benefit to an individual. So, for example, if you give $100 a month in student loan payments as one of your benefits for your company, that's $1,200 a year. Normally, that would be imputed income to an employee, and they would be taxed on it. But what the CARES Act did is for the year 2020, that's no longer a taxable event. So if you, as an employer, are helping out with student loans for your employees, it's terrific for that particular employee because they're not going to have to pay taxes on that up to a maximum of a $5,250 contribution by the employer towards student loans.
That's great advice, Andrew. The next topic I want to talk to you about is the enhanced unemployment benefit. The executive order, I know, addresses this, and we're receiving a lot of questions from our employer clients. Could you talk more about that, please?
Sure. In today's world where there are furloughs and work, layoffs and things like that, one of the things that employees are very concerned about is how are they going to continue to support their families, pay their rent and the like. Now, what the CARES Act did is it allowed for an additional $600 per week of money to go into an employee's unemployment check. That ended on July 31st. and Congress took no action. So if you had laid off an employee in April, from April through the end of August, they got an additional $600 a week above and beyond what would normally be due to them on unemployment. Now, the president took action on August 8th to put money back into that, to say, we're now going to boost this up, not by 600, but by 400, with the federal government paying for 3/4 of it, so $300, and the states kicking in for $100 of it. So an employee could theoretically get an extra $400. Now, additional guidance came out that said if they're already getting $100 from the state, well, that counts. And this money is coming from the president's disaster relief money. This whole pandemic has been create a state of emergency, a declared state of emergency. And what the president is choosing to do is move around money to help do this, since Congress has not.
I have two follow-up questions.
Sure.
Number one, I live in Maryland. A lot of my colleagues live in Virginia, and we have employees and employers with employees all over the country. My first question is, how does it impact an employee in a different state? My second question is, how long is the money going to last?
Okay. Well, the first one is states have to opt into this. So, for example, here in the state of Maryland, Governor Hogan applied for the program through the Department of Labor in early August, shortly after the executive order was signed, and the money is expected to start flowing towards the beginning of September. Some states have chosen to opt out of it, in which case this benefit will not be available to employees. And it's going to be important to let any employees that a company lets go know about this and help them along. As to your second question, how long will it last? Unlike the CARES Act that set a date certain, things ended at the end of July. Yes. Things ended at the end of July. This is only going to go until the money runs out. The president has some money that was allocated for disaster relief that he is repurposing for this. In order to get more money, Congress would have to pass a piece of legislation to do so. In fact, there are some questions about whether the president has the authority to do this in the first place. However, Congress has not, as of yet, 3 weeks later, taken any legal action to try and stop it.
That's great. Andrew, the next part of the executive order, we're not getting a lot of questions about, so let's not spend too much time on it, but I know there is a provision in there about evictions. Could you talk to us briefly about that?
Sure. Yeah, you're right. This is not something that's really affecting people on the employer level. Though if an individual, an employee perhaps, or just someone that you know, is in danger of being evicted for failure to pay rent or failure to pay a mortgage, the executive order doesn't outright prohibit it, but it is requiring federal agencies to dig in and do some more work to try and help people out. In the meantime, what would be best for an employee or for an individual who is in danger? Reach out to their local government, because a lot of local governments have forgiveness programs in place. They have funds that can be drawn upon. Montgomery County, where we live, does. But so do places like New York City for rental assistance funds.
Gotcha. Now, the last executive order we've been getting a lot of questions about, and you have fielded a lot of phone calls, as have I. I want to talk to you about the Social Security deferral executive order. Could you talk to us more about this? And my understanding is it's going to put more money into employees' pockets.
Yeah, that's correct. That is the goal of that executive order, to make everyone's paycheck a little bit heftier with a little bit more cash in it. What normally happens on an individual's paycheck, and this order only applies to folks who are making under $104,000 a year, but on an individual's paycheck, 6.2% of it is withheld for Social Security. That's matched on the employer side, but the only portion we're talking about here is what's on the employee side. And that 6.2% will not be collected through the end of the year if that is the direction that a company and an employee decide to go. That 6.2% will, however, accrue. These taxes are still deferred, and they will be due in 2021.
I've heard that President Trump is talking about forgiving this altogether. Do you think that's going to happen, or how would that play out?
Well, the president doesn't have the authority to just ignore taxes, to forgive taxes on its own. That's something that is given to the legislature.
Okay.
So what the president has said when he signed it was, if he's reelected, then he wants to get all that money forgiven. Could he do that? Possibly. It will depend on the makeup of Congress afterwards. It will depend on who gets reelected. But for right now, the president does have the absolute authority to delay the collection of taxes. We all saw that earlier in the year when the tax day was moved from April 15th to the middle of July. All that's saying is the government's just waiting to get its money from you. And the president has the authority to do that. So what he has done is said, you're going to keep this extra money in your pocket, but it will come due in 2021.
Interesting. Do you have an example that you could go through with this?
Sure. So let's take an individual who's making $75,000 a year.
Sure.
Because keep in mind, this only applies to somebody who's making up to $104,000 a year. So that individual that's making $75,000 a year makes roughly $1,440 a week. Of that, 6.2% is about $89. So for an individual who's getting paid every 2 weeks, that's $178 more that would be in that individual's paycheck. Now, $178 is real money. It would help people out, whether it's paying rent, buying groceries, just living their daily lives. So that extra $178 boost would be extremely helpful for some people. Now, this deferral only goes through the end of the year, but doing some rough back of the napkin math, those taxes, they're still owed. And even though you're seeing it in your pocket now, they would have to be paid later. And through the end of the year, that total comes to about $1,600 that would be owed on the deferral. Now, how that's going to be paid back, we don't know. We don't know if it has to be paid back as a lump sum or over 6 months or over a year. We don't know. It may even be forgiven. But we have to await additional guidance on that.
And it's probably best to plan on paying the taxes.
It's always best to plan on paying the taxes. And if somehow it is forgiven, that would just be a lovely gift to everybody to have that extra money in their pockets.
That's great, Andrew. Andrew, thank you for going over the executive order for us and explaining each component. I really appreciate that. Thank you for attending our session today. Again, my name is Eric Mothershead, joined by my colleague, Andrew Beardall, partners at the Capital Group. Capital Group is a financial services firm specializing in benefits, human capital management, commercial insurance, and retirement. We're glad that you were able to be with us today, and please reach out if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you.